Welcome, everybody. We are in our summer series. Now, usually with the summer series, we like to do something about the Psalms, all those type of things. And since we finished the Lord's Prayer, I thought, what do we do over the summertime? And thank you again to Corey and Laura for speaking. And what do we do over the summertime to carry this on? And so I thought about after party, after the prayer. And so we are going to talk about what happens after the prayer, because we wanted to get through all of Sermon on the Mount. There is so much in the Sermon on the Mount that we could go on forever, which I tend to. But what I thought about, do we end it now and do something different, or do we just kind of finish it off, because we have some big things coming up and we're very excited about. Liz mentioned Johnny Morris, so we have the Prodigal Gospel that we're going to do a little bit of a sermon series leading up to Johnny when he comes. He's going to come the first week of October. It's actually quite exciting because we have First Baptist in Kelowna. They're coming, and they're going to be hosting part of it. So we're going to come here for Friday night, and then we're going to go to First Baptist for Saturday, for the Saturday 2 sessions. And then Johnny will be back here Sunday morning. We also have a church from Southwest Baptist in Kamloops coming down for it. A few of them are going to come. We're very excited for that. Friends of ours, friends of Johnny's as well. So that's fun. And I'm talking to Joel at Metro and just seeing whoever else is wanting to be interested in coming to that. Big part of the Prodigal Gospel is learning about the simplicity of the gospel, but also a new way to look at atonement and all that fun, exciting stuff. But also we want to make it a spiritual retreat so we can kind of rest into who Jesus really is. So I'm excited for that. We're excited to have him come. So we're going to be doing that in September, and then lots of other stuff coming up. So don't bore you too much with that until later on. Thank you, Liz, for reading the passage earlier. We're talking through priorities, treasures, and the good life. Scarcity is something that is real in our lives. The human condition is haunted by the fear of scarcity. It's pervasive. It's one of those things that we are always worried about being on the short end. If you were, I didn't grow up in ultimate poverty, but there was moments of lack in our house. And when you grow up in a situation like that, there is moments that you want to bring as much into the fold as you can, because I think there's just these ways of developing and these ways of living that you had little, so you want to obtain a lot. Eli and I were driving the other day, and the gas tank was getting low. I do remember moments of my life, my personal life and my family's life, where you had to coast in to the gas station. Has anybody ever had to coast into a gas station before? Now, was it because of necessity, or was it because of you're like, how far can I take this? I've done both. I've made mistakes on both. But he's asking, how long, how far can you go on a tank? Those kind of curious questions that you have. And I got to thinking about that just this morning, about the idea of scarcity. When you have no fuel in the tank, you are doing everything. He said, do you go faster? It's like the old classic. Do you run in the rain to get less wet, or do you walk in the rain to get less? Have you ever thought about that before? Have you heard about that before? So how do you get to your destination if you have nothing left in the tank? Literally, metaphorically, and all of that. And so he's like, do you go faster? Do you go slower? But whatever happens, when you get to a gas station, you will, if you have that money, if it's not just a $5 bill that you need, and you will fill the tank up. That's pretty normal. You're like, I want to be as far away from that situation as possible. That's normal. Filling that tank up and having that is already there, preserved for you, that kind of saving up that gas is normal. You don't want to put $1 in every time and go to the next gas station. What would be weird is if you got so scared because you ran out of gas that you also went and bought 12 jerry cans and filled them all up and put them in the back of that would be weird. That might be a little bit of excess. And then you would realize after you've watched The Walking Dead that's not true, and gas actually goes bad and it doesn't work after 6 months, so it would be maybe a year or two. But eventually, I don't know why I talked about The Walking Dead there, but I did. We're not going there. But the idea is that when you have nothing, we want to go the opposite. But we don't want to go over and above the opposite. We fear that we won't be enough. We fear that our land and our oil and our water and our food and our money and our resources won't be enough. So we construct and maintain structures, and they become sinful structures to guarantee us and ours. to guarantee that what we have is enough. And these songs that we sang this morning are really talking about how the reality is we will never be enough. No matter how many jerry cans you put in the back of your vehicle, that will never be enough, because that is all fleeting. So with the idea of scarcity, and before we get into that, we want to talk about a few different things. I am very excited about the PowerPoint today, and I think Adriel looked at that, and it's pretty cool. And I learned about layers. Anyways, the worship of wealth. We store up treasures. There's a few things what happens when we have scarcity. First thing is we worship wealth and we store up our treasures. We gather as much as we can in order of hopes of security that the ever-fleeting admiration of others will see us through to the next day. We want to store up our treasures. As we get into the scriptures, we're going to see that we do store up treasures that eventually will rot away. And when we store up treasures, we start to prioritize stuff. We have checklists, we have things that we do, we have ways that we do that have our own best interests in heart. Jesus addresses these here in this section when we're going to get to it. He talks about fasting. He talks about we're prioritizing the admiration of others. When we look at treasures, we're prioritizing taking care of our own needs. When we talk about our eyes shifting to the left or right, we're prioritizing where our gaze goes, who our gaze looks at, and what gaze is looking at us. And with all of that, with the stored up treasures and with our priorities, what master then do we prioritize? Do we go left or do we go right? Do we follow Jesus and his kingdom, or do we follow our own kingdom? We've all had that conversation about where do your priorities lie. One of many of those conversations happened at Bible school in Eston, Saskatchewan, and the dean of students, oh so wise, didn't pull me into her office. She pulled me to the side of all my friends while they were all sitting there, and they all heard our conversation. She's like, if you don't pull it together, you're going to get kicked out of school. And I'm like, that's intense, that's weird. Probably, maybe on me a little bit, I guess. But she also pulled me to the side in front of my friends, so it was a tough one. But it was one of those moments that I had to realize my priorities. Later on in life, I'm like, that's the silliest thing in the world because I've already paid for this, and well, no, I haven't paid for the next semester yet, and you want that money anyways, so you're going to keep me in school. But I didn't think that way. That's bad. But we ever had those conversations? What do you prioritize? Where are you going? Where are you headed? Kids, if you haven't had that conversation with your parents yet, Selah, Emily, Eli, eventually that conversation comes. Where are your priorities? What do you want to put first? So we have to do that. And then, with priorities, the whole point of that, to store up treasure, to have our priorities, is to have the good life. We want that good life. We want that, the treasure. We want the happiness, money, excess, we think can buy us that good life. We think that we can pursue happiness in our own way. See, finances are interesting because as much finances as we can get, that's fine, but it will never be more than the person has somewhere else. Now, hear me when I say this, and I will speak to this in a little bit. This is not an anti-finance thing. This is not an anti-finance sermon. We were at Chris and Suzanne with Todd the other day, and Todd reminded me, Jesus talks about finances more than anything else, so it's interesting. But when you get into finances, when you get into the good life, when you get into the security of life, you will never be enough because you're always going to compare yourself to somebody else. Because we're always going to be trying to keep up with the Joneses. Our whole point of when we serve ourselves is that we're trying to build up our own security and our own good life. Jim Carrey said, he says, I wish that everybody could have as much money as I do. Stop there. Great. He said, because then they will realize that it doesn't bring you happiness. Yes, money can bring you security. Yes, money does. It's fine. Money, if you have an excess of it, you don't need to worry about the next bills, which is fine. But that's not going to bring you true joy and happiness. I've lived on more the latter than the former. I've lived on the side of where's the next thing coming from quite a bit. But I've also had that comfort for a while too. That is nice. But that comfort that we find in ourselves doesn't genuinely bring happiness. It'll only bring a comparison. In the book, The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, psychologist Barry Schwartz argues that having too many options actually impairs our happiness. He argues that the human psyche is paralyzed by the abundance of choice. How many times do you sit and you look at your phone, it's just like, there's so much there that can make me happy, and it's just too much. You know, you bring in stuff. You're like, this will make me happy in this moment. This dopamine chase will be good. This will be good. And we bring in all of this stuff. This is no judgment. This is a reality that we live in. Who has been to a third world country before? I mean, I've been to Africa. I've been to, you believe it, I've been in the Gambia in Africa. I don't know the depth of their happiness, but the joy seems genuine. And you go onto these trips, and then you come home, and you're like, I got all of it, but my joy seems fleeting. No, I'm not going to use that example. I saw a Mr. Beast video the other day. You get sucked into these things, right? And it's like, you can live in this house, this room, for $100,000, and if you make it to the end, you get all the money if you don't. And then they were like, or $500,000, and they said about 70 days into this, like, you can have more if you just bid this much money. So they wasted $100,000 of this $500,000 to have beds and have movies or whatever it was. And they said in this little video that's silly that I watched, they said, yeah, having this bed and having this choice and having all the videos and DVDs to watch and having all of this that we paid way too much for, actually, it brought frustration in their relationship because there's two people that were living in this small room for $100,000 for 80 days or whatever. And they said having a plain old room with nothing was difficult, but having the choices and having the beds and having the videos to look at and to watch actually brought tension in their relationships. So the more that we have, the more that we try to accumulate a good life, it actually leaves us lacking because we start to depend on ourselves and we start to compare ourselves to other people. The truth is, happiness is rooted somewhere far deeper. Somewhere far deeper than we can ever acquire on our own. I think that's why, as we go into this section of scriptures, there's four things that happen. And actually, Liz, I didn't give her the first one to read. And the first one is actually this. Is there a verse on there? Yes. Matthew 6, verse 16 to 18. Talks about fasting. When you fast, don't look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil in your head and wash your face, so that you will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. This is the first thing that we're looking for in life. This is the first provision that we're looking to bring into ourselves. We're looking for other people to recognize the good that we've done. You know, as I sit in front of you, and I've had some great, maybe, decent sermons, and I've had some really horrible. And you're like, you live off of the feedback of people. Ask my wife. I said, look, Liz, I did the lawn. I mowed the lawn. She's like, stop trying to gain my approval. And but look how good the edges are. It's fantastic. We are addicted to being loved and cared for by other people. We are addicted to not just being loved and cared for, we are addicted to being admired by other people. I think that's why Jesus, he starts off this section where we get into treasures and we get into our eyes and we get into what master we will serve by saying, hey, look at fasting first. What are we prioritizing? Do we want other people to look at us with nice eyes or with horrible, with disparaging eyes? And what we need to realize is that the eyes that we need are God's eyes. So this is the good life in real life. If you've ever intermittent fasted before, it's one of those things. You've seen that meme before where if you meet a vegan and a CrossFitter and a runner, what do you talk about first? Because they're all going to want to talk about how good they're out CrossFitting and how much vegan they are and how good a runner they are. Well, when you meet an intermittent faster, you are so excited that person exists and you can tell all about your different ways that you do it. When I started intermittent fasting, it was years ago, I was hangry for a while. It was difficult at the beginning, but I made me realize this was not a spiritual thing, just so we know. This is not a spiritual thing that I was doing. It was a fast just for my own health. I thought, I should shift things around. But the first thing that happened when I realized that I could do this is that my desires and my thinking that I needed certain things throughout the day shifted. It shifted to be like, okay, I'm sustained, I'm fine. I think what Jesus talks about fasting first is because fasting food is what sustains us in reality. Scientifically, we need food to live. And Jesus says, let's master that first, the stuff that you need. Let's master that first. Let's take care of that. Because if you realize you actually don't necessarily need as much as you think you need, then you can move into the direction of dealing with stuff that are treasures here on earth. So if God is more important than our actual sustenance that we need daily, then how much more important is He? So when we fast, and remember, fasting is we're not going to get into fasting right now too much, but this is for people that are in a healthy space and can do this. But when we are fasting, we are actually, three things happen. We're reminded of what we actually need. It reminds us of the needs of others. When I take some time from food, I realize that there's people that go without. So you start to think outside of yourself. And then it helps us and others find the good life. And I mean that by the fact that in Ramadan, at Ramadan, people do it together. There's a community building thing that when people fast, they fast together. And it's a real community building moment. So when we would fast as a community, it's like, hey, we're doing this together. We know that somebody else is doing this with us. So the beauty of fasting, the beauty of doing this together is that we realize that it helps someone else. Even so much so to a hunger strike, where you can go without so that somebody else can go with. You know what a hunger strike is. We've heard of these before. When we say that what we sustains us daily can be submitted to Jesus, that is a whole game changer of our priorities and what our treasures lie. So if we can sort that out, what actually sustains us, then we can get into the next section. Stop storing away. I think this is the slide that Adriel commented on, that it's such high quality. We gotta fast, we gotta understand, but we also need to stop storing away our stuff. We worship wealth. Going without excess that we have convinced ourselves is necessary. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. It's interesting, this verse, because when we find something that makes us happy, we want more of that. Talked about that a little bit earlier. When we find something that brings joy in our lives, we tend to keep that. My friend Barron has one pair of jeans that he loves, and so he'll buy that, but he'll buy 5 pairs, not to wear all at the same time, but he'll have 5 pairs, and he'll put 4 on the shelf for the next 10 years because he loves that one pair of jeans. I'm struggling to find the right pair of jeans. It's driving me mental, but when I find it, I'm so excited. But we store up what makes us happy. And you can't store it up so long because it starts to go bad like the gasoline. Let's pick on the NIV for a moment. Yeah, that's right, amen. Let's pick on the NIV for a moment. No, let's pick on the NIV. The NIV says it's vermin in here. So he said, like what I'm saying here is do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where the moths and the vermin destroy. Vermin are rats. Vermin come in and eat things. What moths do, moths come in and eat things. So what moths are taking care of? They're taking care of the food that you store up and the clothing that you store up. When you think about moths, they come and eat those things away. If you have something stored on the side for too long, a moth will come and destroy it. But what the ESV does, little props to ESV, and the NRSV does, is it uses the word rust. So rust destroys anything else. Rust doesn't destroy your food, doesn't destroy your clothes, but it destroys anything that we can acquire with a metal. So moths consume our fabric and clothing. These are the necessities of life. That's what I see represented there. Rust represents the hard, good materials, the metal coins, and the things that we think about that are treasure. Jesus isn't talking about the things that we consume in our day-to-day, but the things that we want to bring up, that we want to store away, that we want to bring more of for ourselves to give us safety in the future. He's saying, look, that's going to rust away. The moths are going to come. And then in the end, the stuff that we store up can be broken into and stolen by thieves. So anything that we have on this earth that is physical isn't bad, but if you store up too much of it, it's just going to go to waste. So then we're going to jump ahead to two masters. We're going to skip the middle bit. Two masters. The word wealth in our minds translates to money. You can't serve both God and wealth. We put that into money. Martin Luther he realized that word was actually mammon, and mammon means wealth, a general consumption of things. What can you consume? So when we look at the stuff that we can consume and the stuff that we are hoarding, it's all the wealth that we can have. And what you want when you want more of that is you are going to have to pursue that. You have to pursue, if you want more of something, you have to pursue it. Just like when you want more of Jesus, what do? You pursue Jesus. So if you are off on a trajectory pursuing more, you can't be on the trajectory to pursue Jesus at the same time. I know I'm not trying to sound harsh. I'm not trying to say that you can and can't, whatever. But what I'm trying to say is that this is just Jesus' word. We cannot be pursuing to keep up stuff that will rot away when we should be pursuing Jesus. Because as we pursue Jesus, he has promised that he is going to meet our needs anyways. So, killing two birds with one stone, you just pursue Jesus and he will give us the stuff that we need. It's not a prosperity message, not all of that stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that, look, Jesus is asking us, pursue him, and those other things will be taken care of. I got into trouble a number of years ago with my friend Anthony. Anthony, over here. He's never let me forget it. I did a prescriptive sermon. And what a prescriptive sermon is I'm going to prescribe to you what to do. And we talked about watches and how much a certain watch costs. I can't believe people have a X amount of dollar watch. And then a couple people were like, oh, that's how much my watch costs. How awkward was that? So he's never let me forget that. This is not that. Have all the, whatever. Have one good watch. Anyways, no, stop. This is not about that. I'm just trying to describe what Jesus is saying. I just want to catch the heart of what Jesus is saying is that the beauty of the good life is that we can pursue him and it will be taken care of in the other way. It's not easy. But how do we do that? So we go back to let's talk about this. This is my little caveat. Wealth is great and it can do a lot of good. It can create access and opportunity just like the wealthy landowner who represents the kingdom of God. As long as you remember what wealth is for and don't make it wealth and material goods the destination unto itself. We don't want to make wealth and material goods the destination that we are looking for. We want to make Jesus the destination we are looking for. There are some beautiful, amazing people that have been blessed with finances in that sense. And they are so good and generous with that. I have a friend in England said, I want God to make me wealthy so I can be generous. I'm like, I feel like that's a bit of a cart before the horse thing. But that was being judgmental now, wasn't it? So this is my favorite one. The eye. So we've seen the first section, we've seen fasting, we've talked about the treasures that we store up, the moth and rust and people steal. We talked about two masters. But what is it that brings us the good life? We'll talk about the eye. Hebrew idioms are a dime a dozen. If you know what an idiom is, it is a dime a dozen. See, biblical translation is tricky. Not only are you translating one language to a different language. Plus, we have how many languages in this world? But what are you interpreting them from? In this case, we read it in English, but it has been translated from Greek. But most likely when Jesus was speaking, he was speaking in Aramaic and using Hebrew sayings. So trying to understand and translate all of that information into one language, from their sayings into our understandings can be difficult. So when you get to this I part, if you read it on your own this week, you'll be like, this is a little bit confusing. So when we say something like a dime a dozen, you probably know what I mean. I'm saying I need a dime a dozen. If this YouTube video or this piece of paper is translated 1,000 years from now in my horrible way, they'll be like, what is a dime and what is a dozen? They'll try to translate what a dime is and what a dozen is. They won't be thinking about the fact that, whatever is a dime a dozen. Or, go break a leg or whatever else. So this is an idiom. See, good eyes and bad eyes is what Jesus is talking about when he talks about wealth. Anin Tov is the good eye, and Anin Ra is the evil eye. I just want to read this passage one more time because I just want to read it, this little I part. Where is that verse? At the very beginning. The eye is the lamp of the body. Your eyes are healthy. Your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. And then the light within your darkness, how great is the darkness? Did the mic go away? Sorry about that. One day. Through the whole thing. There we go. Read that one more time quickly. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. And then the light within you is darkness, and great is that darkness. So Anin Tov is the good eye, and Anin Ra is the evil eye. Let's look at Proverbs to understand it a little bit more. Proverbs 22:9 says that the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. But if you read it in their original, it says, more literally, it says Hebrew, the good eye, Anin Tov, is blessed because it gives food to the poor. So we're reading an idiom. We're saying the good eye gives to the poor. And you'll find, do not eat the food of the begrudged host, and do not crave his delicacies. More literally, it says, do not eat food from the evil eye, Anin Ra, and do not desire his savory foods. So when Jesus is talking about the good eye and the bad eye here, what he's actually talking about is generosity. The way that we find, all the way back to it, the good life is by being generous with what we have or what we don't have, with our abundance or without our abundance, because when we pursue Jesus, we are actually giving from his abundance that he's already given to us. In Matthew, we hear, I'm not going to read it, but Matthew 14, verse 17 to 19, and throughout the Gospels, we have the story of the loaves and fishes. Jesus took the loaves and the fish from a boy. He had what he had, and he brought what he had, and he was generous with what he had because he knew that that would feed him for his trip home or whatever it would. But he knew that there was people there that had without. And he's like, well, I'm going to give you what I have. And when I give you what I have, maybe you can do something with it. At least we can share it with a few people here. Obviously, he wasn't thinking that it was going to get made into enough food for 5,000 people. But he was saying, here, I'm going to give you what I have, whatever that is, and see what you can do. Could you imagine 5,000? Again, they may count men only, so it could be whatever number. Let's just take 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fishes. What that would be, it would be a drop in the bucket. But this boy brought his drop in the bucket, and it filled everybody up. And the beauty of that verse and the importance of it saying, and there was some left over. As we pursue Jesus and living like him and the good life of him and his generosity, there will always be more left over for us. What does that more look like? I don't know. I don't think that's something that's in your bank account. That's not necessarily, it could be, it couldn't be. That's not the point. The more is the beauty of Jesus in your life. So let's choose to be a generous people. Let's choose to to stop and to think, how can I be more generous? It might not be with your finances. That's something that between you and God. You need to stop, you need to pray, God, what do we do? So how do we find out? We stop. Psalm 37, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Psalm 37 is filled with this idea of seeking vengeance, wanting something done for somebody else, looking for treasure. But then what the psalmist says is just be still and wait patiently, and I will take care of all your needs. I'm convinced that as we spend more time with Jesus, concentrating on him, looking at the beauty of who he is, we will start to see his generosity, his ultimate generosity. Our bank accounts, for the most part, are razor thin. Life is expensive right now. When you sit with Jesus and you keep your eyes focused on him, it will come off of your lack, and it will go on to his infinite. David Bentley Hart calls it the beauty of the infinite. Jesus is infinite. We need to stop looking at our finite finances, no matter how big our accounts are, and looking at the infinite that he gives us. The gospel is absolutely full of generosity, continually asking us to put others first, continually calling us to place the needs of others number one. That is why I love this church, and I love the church in general, because the church, 95% of the churches out there are genuinely giving to those that are in need. There's some bad press that goes out there, blah, 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 but for the most part, we're all doing really well. And I know that we're all trying our best here. And the reason why we try our best is because we serve a God that was ultimately generous. 1 John 3:16, this is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. The pinnacle of generosity, the pinnacle of what we will ever need is there. So we go all the way back to fasting. We don't need stuff that sustains us daily because we have our King in Jesus. We have the moth and the thing and the rust that all the stuff melts away, the stuff that we think we need, the stuff. It's okay to have some stuff, but sometimes it gets rotted away if we keep too much of it. So to follow him, pursue him, we need to be a generous people. So I want to encourage you with that. I do want to sing a song. We're at 11:10. But before we sing that song, it's an old song. Hey, amen, we got an old song happening today. What I want us to do is I want to talk in our little groups that you've formed naturally. Reflect on a few ideas of greed and generosity. If you are generous, everything in you will be full of light. But if you are stingy and greedy, everything goes dark, that idiom. How does the way of Jesus talk about money, greed, and generosity? How does that touch your life? Take a hard look at yourself and your life and your priorities. Where is your heart? And then what in your life are the 5 loaves and fishes that you can bring? So some of these may be more personal, but let's just talk amongst ourselves. What does this mean? What kind of stirs in your heart from this talk? And then we'll have some time to worship afterwards. So start talking.